All right, good evening, everyone. So this is going to be a bit of a representation of sorts of my master's thesis, but with a little bit of additional content that I had to squeeze out last time and some stuff I made just for tonight. So you're probably looking at this and thinking, what is the new Urbanist Nesting Doll? Well, the new Urbanist Nesting Doll is a toolkit I created. The idea is that the items proposed within are meant to be universal enough that they will have replicable results wherever they're implemented, but they're flexible enough that they can be adapted to fit the nuances of each community. The resulting community improvements will not look the same in aesthetics in every place, but they will have comparable outcomes and forms of function. The goal is for any suburban community, no matter what its current walkability, layout, or location is, to be able to take the tools presented within the nesting doll and successfully put them to work to fix what ails their communities. A lot of this is premised on a theory I had at the start of this, which was that most American suburbs are sleeping 15-minute villages. And let's just real quickly explain what is a 15-minute city or village. Essentially, the idea is that your everyday needs are all within 15 minutes of your front door by foot or by bike. Now, there is some debate about what elements need to be within that 15-minute range. Some people, for example, would argue that schools should not be considered within that because, well, not everyone is a parent, or, not everyone needs a school for the entire life of their children. Other people would argue that your workplace should be within that 15-minute range. Other people would not. But for our purposes, the idea is that your day-to-day needs are all within 15 minutes of your front door by foot or by bike. Now, for my thesis, I focused in on a little suburb in Pennsylvania called Swarthmore. Now, Swarthmore is a suburb of Philadelphia. It's about 1.4 square miles in size. It's on the Media-Wawa Regional Rail Line. It's home to Swarthmore College, and it's home to about 6,500 people. If you only include full-time residents and you exclude the students, it goes to about 4,800. It's also just happens to be where my parents live. So let's look at the present order of things in Swarthmore. Now, Swarthmore's zoning code is pretty emblematic of a lot of American suburbs. It's predominantly single-family housing and uses what I call mansion zoning. Now, why do I call it mansion zoning? Well, let's take a look at that area in blue, the RB residential. Well, to build on that, you need about 14,000 square feet of land, about a third of an acre. Granted, you're not allowed to build on all of it. You're only allowed to build a home on about 18% of that, about a little over 2,500 square feet. Now, you have a maximum height of 3 floors, so in theory, you could build a home as big as 7,600 square feet for one family. And maybe in a few cases, you could split that in half, maybe for a twin, but that's per third of an acre. And there's high setback requirements on top of that, so you have these mansions on a hill by law. And that it has predictable results. On the right, that is the typical age of housing in the county that Swarthmore exists in, Delaware County. Thank God it doesn't exist in Montgomery County, which is right next door. Yes, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Otherwise, we'd be getting very confused tonight. So you can see that in Delaware County, as in most Philadelphia suburbs, there was a lot of housing built before World War II, bit of a dip during the war, and then post-war there's a big boom that kind of trails off over the next few decades. Swarthmore, by contrast, with its mansion zoning laws, has a bit of an outlier. About half the houses in Swarthmore predate World War II. And while it did experience a similar pattern of development boom after the war, it was much more subdued. So you have a lot of very big, very expensive homes with a very artificially constrained supply, with creating an artificially low population density, and And if this sounds familiar, it's because that's a pattern that we've seen in a lot of suburbs in the United States, though not necessarily the same housing age, as we'll get into later. But with that being said, Swarthmore actually has a really strong start for using the nesting doll. This is a walkshed map of Swarthmore. And you'll notice that from the train station at the center of town, about the entire borough, the whole town, is within 15 minutes on foot. So it's already, in theory, a 15-minute village. There are some outliers, but I personally think that that's not only addressable, I think that these softwares tend to underestimate walking speeds, but that's neither here nor there. But also, it has a really strong start because of infill development potential. So these are parking lots right next to the train station in Swarthmore. Anywhere else in the world, this would be the most valuable land in the entire town. And here it's a parking lot. Again, this should sound familiar. This is actually where I started when I set out on this project, because as my father said, hey, the town was thinking of doing some development in those parking lots. Maybe you could do something with that. Yeah, I did that in a weekend, and then so I was like, well, what else can I do with this? And before I knew it, I was rewriting the entire plan for the borough. So let's break open that first layer of the nesting doll, shall we? Infill and transit-oriented development. So this is what's there now. There's what could be there. A vibrant, mixed-use development with parking built into it, because you have to have parking these days. God forbid you don't have any. But you could take what is currently effectively underutilized land and fit in about 13,000 square feet of net area of retail space, 14,000 square feet for a cinema, which is coated in orange, and space for about 689 people. Just on those two lots. The key, though, to this is that you'll notice the site is connected as directly as possible with both lots and with the adjoining train station, and by extension, the whole borough. Connectivity is very important for effective infill development. Please keep that in mind for later. Additionally, you'll notice that most of it is not driving space. It is pedestrianized. Again, when you do good, effective infill development, the idea is that you can walk to the train station, or you could walk to the periphery where the parking garage is, where you probably are keeping a car if you have decided to keep one. But the objective of the nesting doll is to make it that cars are optional, not required. That brings us to the second layer of the nesting doll, a strong public realm. Now, there are two elements to public realm. You have streets and roads and parks and other public spaces. Let's start with roads. Now, let me clarify something important here. There is a difference between a street and a road. A street is a local, street. It's where people reside. It's the lowest traffic, it has little snow throughput of cars. If you're going there, it's probably because you live there. Or you are going to a very specific destination within it. A road, by contrast, is designed for going through a place, not to a place. It is designed to carry people quickly and efficiently, and the problem that we often run into is these two typologies get mixed together, resulting in what planners refer to as stroads. It is neither fast nor safe, and often results in a net loss for the community, but we keep building them anyway. But thankfully, Swarthmore just has roads and streets. So this is the main road of Swarthmore, Chester Road. It is actually a state highway, believe it or not. Though, if you didn't know any better, you'd think it's just a local street. It does have a sharrow, but as might be visible from the way that from this photo, it's not exactly a place people want to bike. So, key thing with the new Urbanist Nesting Doll, all roads, or rather as many roads as possible, must be multimodal. So, minimum, you got to put in bike lanes. Something like that. This is Yale Avenue. This is a similar or second busiest road in Swarthmore. And it thankfully, though, has more space on the sides so that you can put in the bike lanes much more easily, resulting in a map something like this, so that the two main roads of Swarthmore have bike lanes on them. If you have more space than just the space that I had to work with here, you would want to consider transit lanes, or things like that. But I hear you ask, what about the streets? That's the rest of Swarthmore. What about the local streets where most people spend a good chunk of their time? Have you ever heard of a shared street? This is something that I think is going to blow your mind. A shared street is a street that every mode uses at the same time, equally. And when you think about it, a shared street is actually the classic form of a street going back thousands of years. Whereas it was only within the last 100 or so that we got this idea in our heads that, streets or roads, they have to be separated by a mode. So, pedestrians over on the side, vehicles in the middle, no people mixing in the middle at all. But, you look at the bottom right corner, that's as recently as the last 150 years. You go down to the District of Columbia, or even parts of county here, and you'll see streets that were definitely built with streetcars running down the middle and people just walking back and forth the rest of the time. So the idea is that with a shared street, you have designed it in such a way that it slows traffic down so that people can walk on it primarily. Cyclists can also use it, but drivers are also able to use it. And what's interesting is that because there is enough friction, it actually results in a smoother use of the space. In fact, this is Ponyton in the United Kingdom. And if I didn't tell you that was in the United Kingdom, you might actually think it was in Swarthmore because that is a very similar architectural style. They took their roads, not their streets, their roads in the center of town and converted them into shared streets. Traffic flow actually increased. Safety increased. Vibrancy of the commercial district increased. It just made the whole town come back to life. And you can see everyone's just moving around, sharing the space. A key thing with the new Urbanist Nesting Doll is you want design to govern how traffic flows. Not signs, not signals, design. And shared streets are actually quite local. This is a shared street right near my home in Washington, D.C. And you can see that it has parklets within it. It is people walking on it. It is mixed use. And it occasionally gets its pop-up markets happening in it. And you can see that the paving is more tactile. It's cobblestone. And why that is important is it sends a signal to drivers to go slower because the pavement has changed. Different pavement, different behavior. Whereas smooth road, I go fast. Bumpy, a little more bumpy, tactile paving, I should go slower. I should be more aware of my surroundings. I should let the people walk around me. So this is Park Avenue in Swarthmore. It's the 0-100 block. It is the main commercial block of Swarthmore. And this is a very rough idea, with very rudimentary software, admittedly, of what it would look like if you had a shared street. You use street furniture, tactile paving, and that is part of why the public realm is part of this section. Because with a shared street, you just made the public realm, well, you just made the streets, I should say, a giant public realm. And in Swarthmore right now, as in many suburban communities, there's not much traffic on the streets. They don't need to be going in a hurry when you're on the local streets. It's the roads that's important on. And when I did site visits, I saw kids playing in the street. I saw people walking in the street even when there was a sidewalk. So what this is not actually that revolutionary. It is a recognition of the use that already exists, but formalizing it with better design. But let's return to the more traditional public realm. This is a parking lot in the center of town. It is what it is, but what if we made it into a plaza? You could still bring in food trucks and vendors for the farmers market, which is hosted there regularly, but you would have activated this space in a way that makes it that if there's no cars there, it's still useful, it's still active, and it's much more vibrant for the community. Well, the idea is that cars are optional. You won't hopefully need one as much. And I also did have, poll questions for the end, but I did have that of an answer to that. And that brings us to level 3, and this is the secret sauce for a good human-centric design: missing middle and connectivity. So first and foremost, we got to overhaul those lot laws, and the key things are replacing a absolute lot minimum with a ratio. For every 1 unit of habitable space, you should have 1.25 units of uninhabited space. And we pair that with the green area ratio. So let's first talk about that open space ratio. So instead of it saying, oh, you need X amount of square feet minimum just to build a house here, instead it's, okay, you want to build a 1,000 square foot home? Cool. You need 1,000 in 250 square feet of additional space for non-habitable uses. And that can be configured in a number of ways. All 4 of those are using the same ratio. You could have it wrap around three sides of your house, also in different ways. All 4 sides of your house. It could even be on just the front and the back if you wanted. But the idea is that you've got rid of the setback requirements. You've instead focused in the ratio to make it that there is the minimum amount of open space that people do desire within the suburbs. It's one of the things that attracted people to the suburbs in the first place. But let's think about this. Uninhabited space includes things like porches, driveways, pools, small sheds. Habitable space, meanwhile, is obviously your home, but it's also your garage, or if you're so moved, an ADU. Garages I included because it is one of the easiest things to convert into habitable space, or because this is just based on the footprint of a house. If you have a garage in your ground floor, I don't want anyone goosing their number. That then turns us to the green area ratio. Now, I know we all love our lawns. They're nice, they're big, they're open. They are a giant ecological disaster. They are thirsty. They are not actually good for the environment, and they are historically just meant to be a sign of wealth. No, seriously, the lawn's origins was just a rich guy showing off, I'm so rich I can afford to have uncultivated land. So instead, we replace it with a green area ratio. Now, the district already does something like this, but I personally like the German model on this. Essentially, you gamify it. You create a score system whereby different actually ecologically beneficial uses of your space get you more points. And there's a certain score that you want to aim for. And if you get above it, great. Maybe you could publish those numbers every now and then, give people a little bit of competitiveness amongst each other. Because there's nothing that a neighbor likes more than being able to one-up a gym next door saying, oh, he's only got a GAR of 4. Mine's 5. So things like trees get you a certain number of points. wildflower or plantings get you a certain number of points. It means wetland reclamation gets you a certain, or I should say recreation gives you a certain number of points. Things that actually have ecological benefit give you more GAR points, whereas just a big green lawn, that doesn't get you that many points, because just because it's green doesn't mean it's actually good. And finally, that brings us to missing middle housing. Now, missing middle housing is very simple. It's denser than the traditional suburban housing, but its scale of structure is actually very similar to the existing buildings that we're used to in the suburbs. The minimum density is about 15 dwelling units an acre. This is depending on how dense you want to make it. So you could have something like a cottage court, a side-by-side duplex, or a twin as we would call it. Stacked duplexes, fourplexes, is mixed use, townhouses, courtyard or apartments. There's so many different ways of doing this. But the idea is that you can increase your density without changing the scale of what is built. Because you'll notice these aren't tall buildings. They're 2, maybe 3 stories tall. They're not even, they're not taking up that much more land, and if any more land than a suburban house currently does. And you might also notice a lot of them have parking still, because this is not incompatible with current desires. So let's put this into practice. So here is Swarthmore as it is. Let's just count residents for the purposes of this. All right? Now watch the numbers. First, let's put in the infill development. Okay, that added a good number of people. In addition to the TOD sites that I highlighted earlier, there's a few other sites that I converted. All right, let's do some more within the town center. All right, let's add some more. Let's really do the whole town center. Okay, wow, that number's getting higher. And as we go, that number keeps getting higher, and that's still all within the 15-minute walk well. And that's also all within in the same similar scale, and it's also not even the most ambitious version that we could have gone with. I decreased the density as I went further out. If I had used the highest density missing middle for the entire thing, that number would have been much higher. And here's the real kicker. Missing middle isn't new to Swarthmore. All of these missing middle typologies already exist within Swarthmore, and they also exist within Montgomery County. They are some of the buildings that people desire most, that people think, oh, this is so quaint, this is something I like about this place. So when people say, oh, if we add this missing middle housing, it'll change the character of our community. It's not changing the character of your community. It is the character of your community. You just forgot it was there. And key to this will be form-based zoning. Now, what is form-based zoning? Currently, most places use a use-based zoning. Basically, you can only have these uses, and it has to be and you have setback requirements and minimum lots and things like that. But beyond that, you can do whatever you want. Form-based coding says, here's a small list of things you can't do with your land, use-wise. No heavy industry, no, parties after 10 p.m. kind of thing. But then it focuses more on the design of your building. It very much focuses on the form of your structure, but not its use. If it fits the form, you can use it wherever you want. And what's the advantage of that? You can have mixed use anywhere by default. And that is actually something very good, because it activates the neighborhood in much more diverse ways. This is a existing backyard bakery in Swarthmore. This guy is existing through what I called the Airbud rule, which was, well, no one told him it wasn't legal, but that really means he's just one bureaucrat with a stick up there somewhere, or away from his business getting shut down. Under a form-based code, he could do this so long as it fits the form. And there's a lot of pent-up demand for that. Finally, let's talk about those new pedestrian connections. Fun fact, there are very few universal laws in this world. Block size is, though, one of those universal ones that humans all over the world rediscovered over and over again and came to about the same conclusion. 600 feet maximum. A block should be no more than 600 feet before there's a break in the building. And unfortunately, a lot of suburbs violate that. That's part of why, as you're walking around and some of the more residential areas of Montgomery County or any suburb, you sometimes feel, oh, this feels really long. Like, why does this not feel like a desirable place to walk? Whereas when you're in, say, an older suburb that was built before the car, or in, downtown areas where they tend to break up every 600 feet, you're like, oh, this feels a lot easier to get around in. I can just walk around this building. So there are some pedestrian connections that already break through the cul-de-sacs or big blocks in Swarthmore, such as that one, but we should add a few more, and in so doing, it would radically transform the connectivity. Related to that, you want to have roundabouts everywhere. Roundabouts, fun fact, safer than traffic lights. They also improve traffic flow, can be installed quickly and in small spaces, as you can see in these two mini cases. That is actually a roundabout that already exists in Swarthmore and has been actually not only a success locally, it has gotten statewide awards. And, oh, did I mention they're cheaper to maintain than traffic signals? Similarly, you want raised crosswalks. Forces drivers to slow down, increases ADA accessibility, it's an effective bridge between roads and shared streets. What's not to love? So, to recap, you start with some infill. You implement form-based codes. You gotta abolish those parking minimums. That just should go without saying. You break up the oversized blocks. You connect the community better, or as a result. You overhaul those lot laws. You revitalize the public realm. You renew and rebuild third places being in neither work or home. You make streets into shared streets. You make roads multimodal, and you use design, not signs, to control traffic. The bottom line with this is that the suburbs are not lost. They are savable. But what about Montgomery County? Let's bring this home. So, Montgomery County is admittedly a bit of a different beast than Swarthmore. It's about 500 times as big and has 1 million people. It also, something I have learned from my work here in the county, has a much weaker municipality system than I'm used to in Pennsylvania, where the municipalities are very strong and has a very strong county. The county actually sets the zoning for most of Montgomery County, except for Rockville and Gaithersburg. It also, interestingly enough, has a slightly different history. Most development occurred post-war, not pre-war. What's interesting is that graph is almost exactly the same in Fairfax and Arlington. But they had very different outcomes, didn't they? Because of conscious decisions. And admittedly, the foundations are less ideal than in Swarthmore. There's this very stark contrast between the existing transit-oriented development and the suburban sprawl. Their roads are much wider. There's stroads galore. And the grid is much more disconnected. But there are signs of improvement. These are 3 ongoing transit-oriented development sites in Montgomery County. At Grosvenor Strathmore, at Chevy Chase's Future Purple Line Station, and at Shady Grove. Though in Shady Grove's case, I have a bone to pick with how it's connected with the station, but it could be a whole lecture in and of itself. But the point is, the doll can be used here. So, how do we do it? Well, let's start with some infill development. Friendship Heights' parking lot looks real tempting, as do all those parking lots along Rockville Pike. All those strip malls with the big, massive parking lots. Heck, there's that disused site that used to have a mall. Could be rebuilt into a whole new community. Yes. Or Randolph Road, just as an example. That's what it currently looks like. What if it looked a little different? Add in bike lanes. Make the median into a turning lane. So put in transit lanes. you would actually increase the throughput capacity of the road and increase the overall desirability and usefulness. Oh, and did I mention that this road isn't a state highway? Hence why I used it for my example, so the county could just do it. As to the streets, as I said, make them shared streets. You will automatically increase your public realm in so doing. You can have local community groups actually engage with the county to take some control over their local shared street, creating a park or space that is to their liking. And again, there is public realm already in Montgomery County. We just need to activate it a little better and spread it out a little more. And finally, that form-based code. This is actually somewhere where the county-centric system actually works in Montgomery in your favor. In Pennsylvania's case, you would have to go town by town by town, begging each one of them to implement this. But in Montgomery County's case, you could get the county to change it. You could change the entire county at the same time, allowing you to implement this kind of form-based code. Well, Rockville, Gaithersburg accepted. With an urban core like here in Silver Spring, urban center, or as I said, the forms are what matter. The scale, but all of it's still using missing middle. None of this is forbidding single-family housing if that's what you want. But the idea is to allow more, because what is at the core of the nesting doll is the idea that when you put the power in the hands of the community and in the hands of the people, not their vehicles, you will create a better outcome for everyone. Thank you, and with that, I will take questions. As a reminder, you do not need to eat the microphone. You can just hold it down here.
Hold it this far.
Yeah. Hold it on the sides.
This is an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Is it in a form that you can send to ACT where we can, and then ACT can send it to somebody if they want it?
So,
or get it off the website, or?
So, there are two parts to that answer. First part is, I'm happy to send you the full written version of the paper, or if you'd like. I'm also happy to make this. This presentation is also going to be available on our YouTube and Facebook pages, as hopefully others, depending on the size of the file. I will also add that as ACT's organizer and being the one who is rebuilding the website, let's just say certain sections of it are going to sound real familiar, because a lot of this was stuff that I actually was finding as I was rebuilding the website, and I was like, yeah, why aren't we doing this everywhere? So, the answer to your question is yes.
So the form it will take will be a YouTube video showing the slides and your voice narrating it.
It can be. It can all. But as I said, I can also, if you would like a copy of the paper version, I can more than happy to send it to you. Though that is Swarthmore focused, does not have the Montgomery County addendum. But as I said, the point of the nesting doll is that it is, as I called it, universally adaptable. It is replicable outcomes, but you can make tweaks to fit your local needs, because not everyone has the same needs. Yes?
Hi. Could you repeat layer 1, what the title of it was?
Infill development and transit-oriented development. And the idea is that a lot of suburban communities either have parking lots next to train stations, which we have plenty of in Montgomery County, or they have strip malls or shopping malls with big parking lots that are positioned in such a way that if you were to do some infill development on them, you not only could demonstrate the effectiveness of almost all the other layers within this new town center that you've built, but you also can make it that the you can use this as the foundation for your, or as the natural locus for your 15-minute city, and it's usually where you want to start building as a result. And then, you can say, and by the way, now, if you want to, if people want to redevelop their properties and, in line with the new form-based code with single-middle housing, they can if they so wish. But we should emphasize, no one is going to make you tear down your house now. It's entirely up to you or the future owners.
Okay, some of these developments and some of the parking minimums. I mean, obviously they're at the mercy of our, the county has yet to implement, abolishing parking minimums, and so is Rockville and Gaithersburg is only doing it in the city center, in Old Town, and there's these awful large parking lots near the Kentlands that are on a property that's owned by a commercial real estate business.
Yeah.
So, is there any way that we could, that as collectively as that act could use elements of this to propose solutions to not just the county council and the city councils of Gaithersburg and Rockville, but also to these commercial real estate businesses to try to get them to do something about the parking excess on their properties, because it's really causing an eyesore to economic development.
Well, there's a few parts to that. So on the so it's not just that it's an eyesore to economic development; it hurts your bottom line. So part of the challenge with parking minimums is that they kind of justify themselves in a lot of people's heads. People drive because there is parking, and therefore there must be parking. But therefore people drive, and it kind of self-reinforces. So parking minimums are very hard to get rid of unless you can help to show people that it's in their own individual best interests, not the collective interest, the individual interest, to change this. So in the case of Montgomery County, one of the things you can do, one of the things that has recently happened is we have reduced, if not eliminated, parking minimums. I believe this passed the State House, to eliminate your transit stations. That did pass, right? Or county county council. Yes, that did pass, right? Yeah. So that's a good start. And by starting there, what will hopefully happen, and what Organist Like Act should do, is really document this is over the next few years as it unfolds, is the private sector will most likely say, oh, I can get rid of some parking, I can actually build a new store here. Okay, that's a more profitable use of the space. I'll take that. And when those stores don't go under, because people actually patronize them, it will hopefully, we will be able to have some more ammunition to go out and say, hey, you took away parking here, world didn't end. Economy's actually doing pretty good. People are actually happier. Maybe we can do that more places. My father, he's an economist, and I was trying to tell them that we need to get rid of parking minimums, and he was, hemming and hawing, and then I said, Dad, you're the one who taught me the importance of allowing the market to decide for itself what it would do. And he just looked at me and went, he just had no words. Because he just realized his son just explained economics to a guy with a master's degree in the subject. So the idea is that we're not going to... So one key thing to emphasize to people when you're advocating to get rid of parking minimums is to tell them, we're not going to take away all your parking. Parking might not change at all for a long time. But by getting rid of the requirement, the private sector will slowly but surely wake up to the fact that, hey, there's maybe more profitable uses for this land other than place to leave car. So it's, it's a slow and arduous process, but it's worth doing. Yes.
Thanks, Lev, for the presentation. And
well, thank you for coming.
I've got, one observation that you could answer as a question, and then another question. That's the main question. It seems like the what you call the nesting box is
Nesting doll.
Nesting doll is the transect, the new urbanist transect, fleshed out. I mean, the transect can offer all the details that the nesting doll does.
Mm-hmm.
But the work you did, for instance, at on your hometown, Swarthmore, when you had the build out, there was a economic advantage in tax revenue, along with other benefits.
Yes.
And I'd like to see this kind of work accessible to a broader public, so that it can be used in charrettes and informal planning.
You and me both.
Because that's the way people can break down assumptions and preconceived notions and see new things. But as you said, you have to explain the benefits in terms of personal benefits.
Yep.
So how do you foresee putting more metrics into this kind of process to show not only a lower tax rate, but also a financial benefit in household income due to less driving, cleaner air, all these things that we don't generally monetize, but we could put some graduated scale of benefit that is minimal in the suburbs and maximizes in certain good designs of urban form.
So I would say, one, and that I can feel my father cringing at the use of the words maximize and minimize, because he has a pet peeve about that. Nothing can ever be truly maximized or minimized. It's technically impossible, but that's neither here nor there. Sorry, every time I hear those words, I can only hear him talking. Anyway, but to your question, first thing I would need, better software. The tools I was using were a lot of ArcGIS, ArcGIS Urban, things like that, and there were limits to that software. But it's also very labor intensive to get those things set up. So, I tried to set it up actually for Montgomery County, and apparently Montgomery County must have more parcels than Delaware County, because it crashed every time. It also has different data sets and data formatting, which is just a whole thing. But I want to address one specific part of your question, which is the monetization. Something I've learned over the years is that if it exists, someone has sat down with a calculator and said, what's that worth? Because everyone wants to know what everything's worth these days. Whether it's the cleanliness of your air, the amount of miles that you drive in a day, or the density of your neighborhood. Someone somewhere has monetized that. And so you got to go out and find, the good data, and you got to plug it into the right, algorithms. Because in an ideal world, if I had the coding skills for this, I would love to see a software out there that you could, say, hey, here's my town. If we implemented, the new Urbanist Nesting Doll, what would the results be? And it would, automatically calculate it. I would love to see that. I do not have the technical skills for that. I do know that there are sites out there, like, for example, parkingreform.org, I believe. They have a site where it shows how much space in your town is, as they put it, wasted on surface parking. Their model's not perfect. I know because I verified it against lived experiences. I'm like, well, okay, they undercounted or overcounted, but that's an example of what you're talking about. How they were able to take good publicly available data and modify it. So I wish I had a better answer for you and someone smarter than me or more technically adept than me will have to figure this out. If you know someone who is, I would love to huddle with them. But at this time, I was only able to do what I could with the tools that I had. Anyone else?
So you've already addressed this to some extent, but so lots of streets in Montgomery County actually use parking to make them streets. They use parking as essentially a road diet.
Yeah.
But it's like, how do you convince people to go the next step?
So, sorry, were you done?
That's basically yeah.
So, two things with that. One is that that's actually not a bad tactic. It's actually proven to actually be, in absence of other infrastructure, a very good tactic to create a safer walking space is to use basically parked cars as a wall. In fact, even with bike lanes, if you have a 3-foot buffer between the bike lane and the parked car, it's actually one of the best forms of a bike lane. Yeah, well, that's why I said that 3-foot buffer is very important, because that can be the difference between dooring and not. And also, since the average car trip is 1.5 people, most people are getting out on the driver's side anyway. But I agree with you as a regular cyclist. I 100% agree that that is not always a comforting thought. But if we go back enough, let me just do this the more direct way. Unfortunately, folks at home won't be able to see this because it'll be a pain in the rear to find this slide. If you look at the shared street design, you'll notice there is still some parked cars within that space. So we're not, and so they are actually still being used as a traffic calmer. And if you'll recall, in the case of the local street that I showed here, there are cars that park there, usually double park, admittedly, all the time. And it actually narrows the road further and makes people drive even more cautiously. I forget it's one of those, Quincy Lane. Yeah, it's one of those streets that you walk on so often that you don't even remember what it's called, because you're like, oh, you take a right next to that store, and but the point is, but basically the answer to your question is, you're not taking away all of the parking, on-street parking, when you create a shared street. But you do want to get rid of all the on-street parking on roads, because when you have on-street parking on a road, that is usually where problems start, because you have people pulling in, pulling out, which creates unnecessary slowdowns, and a road is supposed to be efficient. And the only place you want people slowing down is at intersections, hence the need for roundabouts, or at raised crosswalks. If you have them because when people get slowed down by someone parking their car, okay, now they're going to really get lead-footed, because now they're trying to make up the time that they lost waiting for that guy to pull in or pull out of the spot, which means that they might not notice the pedestrian and crossing the street, and tragedy ensues. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question, and it does, I hope. So in Swarthmore, they actually do have this current argument. You might notice, actually, in this picture, it's kind of blurry, but you notice that they did take away a spot to make a parklet for those local restaurants. And there's a whole debate right now as to whether or not that should be permanent or not. Now, I obviously would love for it to be permanent. And I had to, and the business, and ironically, the businesses are kind of divided on it, because they're saying, well, if someone can't park directly in front of my business, I'm going to lose business. And you're like, but that parklet fits like 8 people. Well, you're literally taking away your business space by asking for that parking spot back. Whereas some stores do understand that, some don't. And interestingly enough, what I find is that the restaurants usually are the ones who understand it best. And the places that are next to the restaurants, they're like, but if people can't park directly in front of my store, it's not directly in front of your store, it's one spot over from your store, and that's one car. At most, that's 6 or 7 people. Well, they do. That's the point. That's what it's used for right now, and it's actually quite pleasant. Other people say, well, what about delivery drivers? they could just pull up, double park it, grab the thing and go. Oh, or use a bike, better yet, which actually further reduces the cost of delivery. So it basically, as I said, it all gets back to you gotta try to help people understand that it's in their own selfish interests. Because human beings, for all our talk about the greater good and all that, we're selfish. We care about we look out for number one. But again, economist father talking now. When a lot of people all collectively care about number one, somehow that ends up being a collective good. As Adam Smith said, the baker doesn't make you bread because he likes you. He makes you bread because you pay him. Well, I'm not giving up a spot because, it's better for the environment. No, I'm giving up a spot because it's good for my business. So you got to make people see that it's in their own best interest. All right. Who else had yeah?
Yeah. So outside of a handful of
a little higher. There you go.
Outside of a handful of urban cores, Bethesda, Silver Spring, Rockville, to name a few, Montgomery County largely doesn't have a connected street grid, and so your example of Swarthmore benefits enormously from a connected street grid where it is possible to walk and bike and whatnot. What happens to the areas that's like, I don't know, 90% plus of MoCo that, some call it limp dick street planning where nothing works?
Well, you said it, not me. But let's, so you'll note it's in green. These are new pedestrian connections that I am saying we should add in Swarthmore. And I'm not sure how well you can see it on the screen because it's at the top, but those up there in the top right corner of that map, that's where all the cul-de-sacs are. It's also the youngest part of Swarthmore. So of course it has all the cul-de-sacs. But the idea is that if you put in pedestrian footpaths like this one at the periphery of property, so that it's not too close to anyone's house, so people don't feel like some stranger's going to walk through their house walk through and stare at them through the bushes in midnight. You also can have plantings along sides to make it that you can't see into housing and all that. All that is possible quite easily. You are helping to break up those oversized blocks, and you're also helping to create the connectivity. Because the key thing here is that your goal isn't to make it that you're connecting people, cul-de-sacs by car. You're connecting them by foot and by bike. Because that is the key. Because if you had to do it by car, you'd never get it done. You'd have to tear down on multiple houses. It would create a whole new issue. But if you just need a footpath, okay, you're giving up, 6 feet wide, 8 maybe, if that, of space on your property? So, Montgomery County has a lot more of these cul-de-sacs, I admit. But because it does, it also makes it that it is all the more important that you put in these footpaths. And because it will help to better connect things. Like, good example, when I was growing up in Swarthmore, I was friends with this person who lived 2 blocks that way, as the crow flies. There was no pedestrian way of getting into them, except for going all the way up to the main arterial, over 2 blocks, and then all the way back down. Kind of like riding in the red line from here to Bethesda. Well, what I needed was a foot version of the purple line to connect to us. When you put in a path that of least perceived resistance, with as direct a routing as possible, it makes it that people are more likely to walk places because it feels easier. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Where even if you get across the block, you're still 5 miles from getting anywhere, and then you have okay, got it. Okay, no, I see what you're saying. So that is where good trail and park design comes into play, and actually Montgomery County has a good track record on this. they have the very effective trails here in the county that connect over long distances people that, you can just walk or bike along them, and it will help join them. But also keep in mind that the idea within the new Urbanist Nesting Doll is it focuses on the local 15-minute village. So there'd be lots of little 15-minute villages within Montgomery County, but it's going beyond that is not the main priority. The main priority is connecting the local, because that's where most people spend their time. And then you connect people with essentially an arterial of a trail, like you have with the MBT, Rock Creek, or Crescent trails. In the back.
Yeah, so kind of actually branching
Two more
off
questions?
that. The examples that you use, whether it's Swarthmore up in the Philly suburbs or a bunch of Montgomery County around here, probably a bunch of DC is applicable with this as well. It really seems like these communities already had either intentionally or unintentionally good bones that they could build off of. And something that I picked up on from the presentation was that outside of one example you cited about development that is based off of the eventual opening of the Purple Line, none of this involves building new transit or upgrading transit that already exists. And I see maybe not necessarily, the intention of this framework, but building up these 15-minute communities, building up this interconnectedness, whether it's, a trail or whether it's a BRT or whatever. Do you see that as something that can be used in a way to kind of start the process of planning transit expansion, where you have multiple kind of hubs of activity that you can connect in new ways that are, branching off of the current network?
Yes. That would be the short version of that answer. But yes, because, key thing about missing middle housing, remember how I mentioned the minimum density is about 15 dwelling units an acre, which is actually a lot less dense than it sounds, but it's actually a lot more dense than you would think. That just happens to also be the minimum density needed to support effective transit and other city services. So when you have that kind of density, you can support more frequent bus service. You can support maybe a proper BRT or light rail or streetcar line again. As I said at my opening, I think a lot of this is predicated on the idea, and you kind of hit on this with your talk of good bones. A lot of suburbs are sleeping 15-minute villages. And transit and you'll notice transit was not part of the 15-minute village. It is not part of that range. You should not need to get on a bus to get to your grocer if you don't want to. You should be able to walk or bike to them. Though some people would disagree with that. That is actually a whole debate within the urban planning community, but it's a minority opinion. The point of transit is to get you from 15-minute village to 15-minute village. So you can actually, one of the advantages of this design is that you can actually create more efficient transit routes. Because right now, a lot of our transit routes have to go out of their way, take weird or circuitous routes to get anywhere. But if you could make them more direct along arterials and make it that people are able to walk or bike that last mile or quarter mile on their shared streets, because they're just so walkable, it doesn't even feel that far, then you can actually increase the efficiency of each individual route, and you don't have to spend much more money to do it, if any more money. You actually might end up saving money in the process. Well, the point is that it makes it easier to do that.
I think this is our last question.
All right, so last question, and is that have you asked one yet? No? Okay, perfect.
Everybody's talking about how we're going to make it work, and they have AI now and systems that are more localized. You can call a cab on your cell phone and it'll come, and as opposed to having mass transit coming into these little villages, you can have a pod car system that's within that will encourage people to use their that their cell phone to call a car and not have to park, and the car will just go off and sit in its wait period, and then next time it will be available for somebody else, and that's how you can get people to get away from having to wait for the bus or wait for the next mass transit subway thing. Kind of it's the next level. There are different levels of that AI driven pod car system, and maybe in the future that could be used for how we do that, as opposed to saying we need to put in a new bus or put in mass transit of some sort, a train on tracks and stuff like that.
So there's a few parts then, so it's a good way to wrap us up because I'm going to try and truncate this. So firstly, let's not conflate AI with autonomous vehicles. Those are two semi-separate things. This image drawn with AI. Autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, there's not technically AI, but that's besides the point. I worked with autonomous vehicles a lot when I worked at the Pennsylvania DOT, but they're coming soon. But let's focus on it. So what you're talking about is adaptive bus, basically flexible routing in route busing, or ride share. If you those are two different things. First rule: ride share is not transit and should not be treated as such. It actually has been found to increase congestion and actually increase the number of vehicles on the road, unfortunately. It also, now as to the adaptive routing, there is still debate on that one, and I don't want to weigh in on that one, and only because there's still debate in the community about how effective those are. But I will say this: when you are able to run transit more directly on the arterials, on the roads, and not have to duck and weave into every little street, what we find, you're able to run the humble bus, more frequently. And a humble bus has more throughput capacity than a rideshare does. They've done numerous studies on that. Well, if we're talking flexible route busing, that's still, as I said, there's debate about how effective that is. The idea here is that you don't need to you can focus your transit on you can have more efficient transit because you focus them on where they are needed for throughput, rather than taking them all but door to door. And as a result, you will have a more effective system. You don't need to invest a lot of money into a mass transit system to make it effective necessarily, if you are able to run it on the most efficient routes. I highly recommend you read Jarrett Walker's book on this. He talks about this all frequently, essentially, when you focus your transit in on the most efficient in arterials, you can run them more frequently, therefore people ride them more, and it makes it that transfers are not as scary, and it makes the system more efficient as a whole. I hope that answers your question, and I am understanding that we are out of time this evening. You all have been a great audience. Thank you so much.
That was wonderful. So thank you again for that. Really informative. Hopefully we do more of that here in the county. Just a couple quick announcements. Appreciate you all being here tonight, especially with the red line shut down. Just want you all to know that the ACT board is going to be advocating for better enforcement of the bus lanes here on Georgia Avenue. The past week or two that they've been in place, we've noticed a lot of parked cars in them, and drivers driving along them, not adhering. So we have another about 75 days of this to go. So just know the ACT is going to be advocating for better enforcement of those bus lanes, so that the shuttles run smoother, and all the other routes along the corridor through them to shut down in beginning of September. Other than that, please, if you're not an ACT member already, please stop by the table on your way out. Talk to Kathy here. Kathy's wonderful, very friendly. We're happy to sign you up. Sign up for our email list. Get some other ACT merch.
We try to limit ourselves to 2 emails a month.
We do. We try and be very gracious to your inbox. It's very affordable membership. It's
costs less than, and it costs to eat out in this area.
Yeah, sure does. So please sign up if you're not a member already. So thank you for being here. If you could please just stack your chairs. We like to be courteous to the building staff here. They're a great host to us.
Thank you very much,
Thank you very much.
everybody.
Thank you.